Okay. So perhaps Ambassador Su, you have some comments too?
Okay, thank you very much, Henry. Well, thank you, Walter and Henry. So honored to attend this webinar and explore how to manage and promote the U.S.-China relations. I have a few thoughts. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I do not see. I cannot see the pictures anymore. But anyway, I just keep just saying. Well, one general premise is that we need to keep the relationship right, and then I have other three aspects of the relationships. The one general premise is that just now Walter said that the relationship has fallen into the most difficult and grave period since the 1980s. To the minds of some of us, actually the relationship has fallen into the most difficult and grave period since the establishment of diplomatic relations. Then we ask why the stalemate, and I think one fundamental reason is because China has been portrayed as an imagined adversary. So my general big point to make is do not regard China as your adversary or as your enemy. There was one political scientist said, well, if you target somebody as your enemy, you might push him in that gradually in that way. The most recent, just now, FA minister mentioned the virtual summit between Xi and Biden. I think the one, you cannot expect the one conversation to solve all our problems yet. There was a very sensitive note, timely too, out of the conversation that is a non-confrontational, because she said that we need to have mutual respect, peaceful coexistence and win-win cooperation. Just now, Edwin also mentioned that probably the relationship, regarding the relationship, we are not there's no hoping for us to go back into the good old days. Yet my point to add here is that, in the past, it's not that we did not have problems. It is because even during the Nixon, Kissinger's visit to China, we had a very serious problem. But the most important thing is that we could manage to find our common interests, or that would transcend our difficulties and the differences. Well, very briefly about the three aspects. That is, the first one is just now both sides mentioned the Taiwan issue. To us, that's one of the most important cornerstone of the bilateral relationship. That is the one China policy. So we need to have a mutual respect of each other's core interests. So that's just one point. The second point is, we have differences. Some are very tough ones, and we have differences, cultures, societies, and economies, and so on and so forth. Yet, we need to have peaceful coexistence and manage those differences. Later, if we have time, I'll elaborate a little bit on that. Otherwise, I'll just mention that we need to find ways to manage differences so that the differences would not escalate into big troubles. The third one is, and also the most important, is that we need to maintain cooperation where it is possible. For instance, in regarding international regional cooperation, there are three most pressing tasks on the world scale. First is how to fight against COVID-19. The second, the climate change and so on. And the third is world economic recovery. and China is ready to coordinate policies with the United States. And China and the US are both members of the UN Security Council, and then just now people already, Edwin already mentioned the Korean Peninsula. And I agree that for China, US, there are so many international and regional issues, such as climate change, public health, and regional issues would include the Korean Peninsula, Afghanistan, Myanmar. There are other regional hotspot issues and global challenges. So my feeling is that possible areas for US-China coordination and cooperation are expanding rather than shrinking. And for instance, China-US could also work together to empower international organizations such as WTO, G20, or CPTPP. And then China, as you all know, that China is bent on this Belt and Road Initiative, United States, and is now together with some European partners are trying to promote this B3W, Build Back Better. Well, probably, if it's the aim is to improve infrastructure in Africa, why there is no need for us to see each other as an adversary? Maybe there is a good opportunity for us to compare notes and find areas and specific things that the two might be doing together. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Su. I don't know if Ambassador Terence Bernstein, you have anything about the trade? I mean, I noticed you'd be mentioning trade. You have been promoting the trade between the two countries for a long time.
Yes. Well, I come from an agricultural region of the United States, and I was involved in the extensive negotiations that led to the Phase 1 trade agreement. And I think that's been a win-win situation. China needs a quality, safety, and reliability of American food products, and China has, in the last year, made record purchases of corn, soybeans, pork, and is now purchasing beef and chicken from the United States. We think this has been a good thing. I was just at an expo on land yesterday. 900 people attended it here in Des Moines, and we've seen a significant increase in the value of farmland here in the United States. And a significant reason for that has been because of the demand that's come from the sales to China. So that's something that is a positive thing from our perspective. I think for the partners in China that purchase it, it's been very helpful in rebuilding the pork herd in China. And I think there's going to continue to be a need for interdependence, and not just in agriculture products, but also in energy as you work to reduce pollution. China has made significant progress. In the time that I was there in Beijing, I saw the air quality improve dramatically, but China is still using MTBE, which is a carcinogenic as a mixture in the fuel as opposed to ethanol. And we, of course, see that as something that could help improve water quality in China. And so I would like to see more cooperation in those areas, like addressing water and land quality, as well as air quality. And I think extending and hopefully even improving on the Phase 1 trade agreement is an area that has a lot of potential. So I have met with the new ambassador, Trade Representative Tai, and with Secretary Vilsack to encourage that. And I think that's something that we would like to see you encourage on the Chinese side as well.
Can I just add one point there? The thing is, from a heritage perspective, we're every bit as free trade as we ever were. Okay, that's not changed for us, but it has changed for a lot of people. It has changed for the Republican Party generally. The Republican Party is not really the free trade party it was 10 years ago, and that's not just China. That's just across the board. They're not that party, and so, as positive as those things are that Ambassador Branstad mentioned, and as strong as we're committed to free trade in areas not touching on security, but you can interpret that broadly. I'm not talking just about grain and ethanol and those sorts of things, but it's not going to change these other issues. It's not going to correct the path that U.S.-China relationship is on. It's going to shape it somewhat. It's going to delay its deterioration, but it's not going to, say, paper over the differences we have on Taiwan or South China Sea or any of these other issues. We're going to have to still address those directly.
If I may,
well, I agree with you, Walter. Those issues do need to be addressed, but I think we can also still see trade as a positive area, and hopefully we can look at ways we can address those other issues and try to get to a situation where the relationship between Taiwan and mainland China is stabilized, maybe. That's something that we'd all like to see.
If I may, I would like to respond to some of the points our American friends have made. One is trade. I think free trade is important. Both China and US benefited a lot from free trade and investment in the past several decades. But here, I think we need to worry about technological decoupling. In terms of technology, we need to put it in the big picture of free trade rather than, given way to geopolitical considerations. This is one point. Secondly, about the Belt and Road, I think people have read too much into Belt and Road initiative by China. There is no strategic political ambition in that initiative. It is more about countries in the South-South cooperation, developing countries trying to help each other, because developing countries like China have gone through the process of industrialization. We know the importance of infrastructure. We know why countries in Africa, other places, have a very weak economy, because they are not interconnected with the world through infrastructure. There is no reliable infrastructure. Look at the vaccination process. Even if you give vaccines to African countries, there are no reliable public health system to provide vaccination to people where they are needed. Thirdly, I agree that Taiwan is extremely important. This is probably the issue that can either break or make our bilateral relationship. The issue. There are no second issue. I would take exception to what Ambassador respectively with Ambassador Branstad, that you mentioned China's Air Force incursion into Taiwan territory. I will not agree to that. I think I see a trend of movements on part of the US that is encouraging Taiwan independence, encouraging Taiwan to break away from the motherland. We all know that the political basis for China-US relationship is one China policy. We may have different readings, but in essence, there only is one China. There's no doubt about it. If we ever go over that or cross that red line, everything will go. Seriously, everything will go. Whatever we have built, whatever good old days we have. And by the way, I would say that, age has changed. We're entering a new age. China has changed, US has changed. So there is no comparison, now with the past. We're in a different age. We need to take different approach to the issues we face. Even if they are the same issue, they are different now. They have different implications. They have different interpretations now. But I would emphasize that United States needs to think very seriously, very carefully before take any action on Taiwan. Thank you.
So
I'd like to see if anybody else on our side. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Anybody from?
Yeah. Anyone besides Ed and Ambassador Brown said? We got several people on the line. I don't want to just make them all our audience here.
Well, I have a couple of questions for our Chinese friend.
Yeah.
Walter, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Ambassador He just said that we are in a very different age, and I think that that's a very important observation. So I have a couple of fundamental questions here for our Chinese friends. The first is, it has long been said that we are still in a period of strategic opportunity. That is the Chinese assessment, that during this period of strategic opportunity, the prospect for conflict is low, and therefore China can focus on developing its economy, on developing domestically. Indeed, reform and opening is possible only because we are in a period of strategic opportunity. If we are in a different age, is it still a period of strategic opportunity? Or is the period of strategic opportunity now fading because we are in a new age? And therefore, what does that mean for not just US-China relations, but how China views the world if the period of strategic opportunity is transitioning to something else? The other question that I have is the emphasis that all of our Chinese Chinese friends have said about not viewing China as an adversary. And I think that that is an absolutely important point, and it is an essential point. But are there elements in China who view the United States as an adversary? And are those elements gaining greater sway in the Chinese debate, especially as we head into the 2022 Party Congress? I don't think that there's much debate about that. But one of the questions that is inevitably going to rise is that even in China, there are inevitably going to be factions, there are inevitably going to be different groups who have very different opinions. So within the Chinese context, to help us understand better, our Chinese partners, if we are to make the argument that we should not view China as adversaries, I think we need to understand who in China views the United States as an adversary.
Okay, I know that Ambassador He have another engagement. Maybe you want to briefly comment this question before you go.
Well, there is not too much to add. I think we need this kind of candid conversation. We really need it. Try to understand each other. There are not too much talking going on, especially at a strategic level. Try to ascertain the true strategic intention of the other side, because there is a lot at stake. Two countries are too big, too influential in the world today. we cannot afford a free drift in this bilateral relationship. But thank you. I'm sorry for having to go earlier, but very thankful for the opportunity to see old friends again, to participate in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Yeah. So Walter, we can continue. I think that maybe I could address a bit to the Dean's question. I think that we're still in a good opportunity era because we now have a digital economy. We have the world have now with trade has gone up so many times, and there's so much intertwined. We have so many people-to-people exchanges, and U.S. and China has never been two pillars of the world. I mean, in terms of engine of the growth. So it depends how you look at it. I mean, of course, we are having more frictions now, but still, it's we have this whole era coming to the world, and U.S. and China has half a century. This is Nixon visit to China 50 years ago. That we have many things has made progress. The world has been more stabilized, more prosperous because of the exchanges. I particularly agree with what Ambassador Terry Branstad said on the trade. And the trade between the two sides has gone up many times, both for U.S. and China. So, and also student exchanges. China has 400,000 students now studying in the United States, and we hope more U.S. students can come to China. And we know that the fast track for the COVID-19 era is just permitted for the U.S. now. U.S. American Chamber of Commerce announced that it was actually pursued by the President Xi and President Biden out of that summit. So I'm still half empty, half full. I mean, I still see opportunities, and I don't know, if Ed has anything to add. How we can, I mean, Walter too. I mean, as a two think tank. I mean, absolutely. Ambassador He said we need a really frequent, maybe more frank talk, and we love to facilitate that. Recently, we've been talking to Peterson Institute, to the Adam Pose, the president of the Peterson Institute, also talking to president of CSIS. So we've been engaging also to the president of Rand Corporation. We do have actually some dialogue with them, but we love to really to have this more dialogue with Heritage, and particularly with Walter, your center, and so how can we even though we have differences, no problem. We can reflect that. We can report that back to the relevant authorities, leaders, to really know what you're really thinking, rather than seeing everything's on the news digest every morning from the media. So we would love to hear your true voice on that. And so if Ed had anything to add on this track too, we love to really accommodate that. And Ronnie also says hi to you because he has something on tonight. But we love to really have this two think tank. We know that you come to China right after Trump took over. I mean, I imagine in Philippines also at that time. But we love to have this dialogue with you more regularly.
Henry,
I'm
the desirability of continuing that as intensively as we possibly can. I'll leave those details up to Walter and you to work out. But I think that this has been a very constructive discussion, just to be very candid and to talk through both what the challenges are, but also a challenge is an opportunity. So let's add and multiply, not subtract and divide.
Right. That's which rule is that, Ed? Which number? Which number of?
Feulner's rule number 7.
7. Okay. Sorry, I didn't bring my little red book. I have something to say here, but again, I want to make sure I'm respectful to everyone on our side. Anybody else on the American side here that wants to say something?
Can I say something? I'm sort of on both sides. I'm an American, but I'm vice president of CCG. And my history is I'm a conservative Republican. I worked for many years for Albert and Roberta Wohlstetter. I wrote editorials at the Wall Street Journal for Robert Bartley. I worked with Freddie Clay. I worked with Harry Rowan. So I have a long history of sort of Republican strategy. And I have to say, I'm very concerned about the American discussion about China today. It seems to be very tactical and not strategic. Not much discussion of what the implications of making moves toward a more confrontational, more Cold War situation would be, both internationally and domestically, for the United States. My perception is that the American press, for example, is creating an image of China that is not what I see. I spoke with an NBC reporter here in Beijing, and I said, let me take you out and I'll show you some rural entrepreneurs. That's a very interesting story. And the NBC reporter said, New York doesn't allow us to do positive stories about China. I think that's creating a very bad perception among the American public about what's going on in China. I also have a perception about what's going on in American politics. My impression is that over the last 25 or 30 years, we've had very bad monetary and fiscal policy, particularly monetary policy, that's likely to lead to a financial crisis in the near future. And I'm really afraid that the Biden administration, or any other administration, could create sort of a wag the dog scenario. They're likely to blame China for their own and their predecessors' economic mistakes. And we've created a very powerful military, economic, intelligence complex, which has more power than it's ever had before. Essentially, it came out of the Patriot Act in a way that, I supported the Patriot Act when it was implemented, but I didn't realize the implications that it would create a very powerful ability of sort of the intelligence complex to be used against domestic political enemies, as we're seeing today. And I think that moving toward a Cold War further strengthens that trend of reducing American liberty and increasing the power of the intelligence services and the FBI to meddle in American politics. And I think that's a very dangerous trend. So I think Republicans should be thinking about the domestic implications of painting China as an enemy and of moving toward a more and more Cold War situation. I think that's totally unnecessary. The U.S. really has, let me finish the statement.
Okay.
The U.S. has few real interests in East Asia. I don't think any worth destroying the country for. And I'm afraid that's where we're moving. So I think you guys should be thinking very seriously about that.
Right. And so do you recognize at all the contributions that the Chinese side is making to this dynamic?
There are some. There's no doubt about that. But I think they're exaggerated. I see a lot of goodwill among Chinese people and among Chinese officials in China still for the United States. And I think that could go away if you're not careful. I think, let me just say, I think Chinese officials are concerned about the decline of American society. I saw a senior Chinese strategist yesterday carrying a copy of Alan Bloom's The Closing of the American Mind. They're concerned about that. And we should be concerned about that too.
Oh yeah, we're fighting on a whole host of fronts, as you know, at Heritage Foundation, including those. But
there's an interaction between the two.
Yeah, but yeah, and the you talk about goodwill on the Chinese side. All the nice conversations and cups of tea and conferences and all the rest don't make up for a lot of the things that are happening there. I think that's what the Chinese side is failing to understand generally. And no matter how many times we tell them, in good faith, actually, this conversation here is in good faith to try to help them understand they continue to come back to us with the same misimpressions about things that are driving the U.S. Attitude on China, that it's a few whack jobs in Congress, that it's the media, that it's all this driving it.
There is, wait a minute, there is no Chinese interest or American interest that is worth the two countries going to war with each other. And we should keep that in mind.
We disagree
I think
about
there's a strong interest of the military industrial complex to find an enemy. And I think that's a lot of what's going on.